WeatherBrains, it is. You have stumbled onto the world's longest running weather podcast. Some say it's the greatest weather podcast in the universe. This is episode number 601, the pre-show for July 24th, 2017. This is the magical time of the program where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and occasionally say outrageous things. So, Brian, pick one of the three.
I'm going to put out a contract on Bill Nye. I figure it's only fair. I mean, he's publicly saying he thinks I ought to die, so seems like I should be able to take one out on him, right?
Wow.
This is the second monster storm that slammed into the Northeast this season. It follows, of course, in the wake of Superstorm Sandy, and it's left the entire quarter one big soggy mess. Joining me now to try to make sense of some of this, Bill Nye, the science guy. Bill, always good to see you.
Good to see you. Good afternoon.
The storm today on a similar trajectory to the path recently taken by Superstorm Sandy. I want
to. This is this bizarre, rambling thing on hurricanes. I don't know if you remember this one. This is one of his classics.
Show these images here. Very similar images of the two paths. What's behind these massive storm systems in this particular part of the country?
Well, this particular part of the world. So you get storms that start in off the coast of Africa, and they make their way across the Atlantic Ocean, and the nature of the spin of the Earth and the pull of gravity makes these things get get a little bit of pressure behind them, and it pushes them northward. And the thing is, if you observed,
gravity's involved. God, I didn't know that.
And both the rainstorm and the snowstorm follow the same track. It's not a coincidence. So when you're there, you may notice that the wind generally comes from the northeast, and people in New England refer to a nor'easter, right? Well, when you live on the West Coast,
and that doesn't refer to hurricanes at all.
That same type of storm is called a sou'wester. And so if you go to the...
All right, enough of that.
Yeah, please, you're going to get me more irritated than I already am at him.
We're just
we're
going to let it go.
He certainly didn't make any bones.
I apologize. Brian started this. It's his fault.
Well, it's not my fault. I joined the Gong Show or what here? You know,
that's right. I've got a buzzer, and we can gong anybody.
Troy, if you want good advice, get out now.
Run
is warned. Bill actually told me earlier, escape now if you can. I said,
absolutely.
This is the part where you say, "Ooh, my internet connection's gone down. I've got to go."
Right. Sorry, guys.
Yeah,
so I can blame it on my chipmunks over here. In case you don't know, Troy, they ate through my line last week.
Really?
Yeah.
That sounds about like a Brian Peters there.
All of a sudden, I went from nice service to no service.
Really?
I think he's making that whole story up. I don't buy it.
I don't know. That almost seems like a James story to me when you really get down to it.
And when we know that Brian, he can steal Wi-Fi from.
I learned from the best, baby. I learned from the best.
He's probably got all 5 neighbors' bandwidth all sucked into his house there that he combines and uses it for free.
Street lights are going.
Yeah. And what is your download speed there, James? 856 megabits.
Pay for it. I'm not some cheapster like you.
I'm paying for it too. Which reminds me, I have to talk to those weevils at AT&T to find out what they're going to refund me for the week of outage.
Well, it's your chipmunks. It's your fault. It's not their fault. I mean, come on, man.
Their cable.
It's an act of chipmunks. Come on.
Yes.
I'm going to go after them anyway.
So, Troy, who is your internet vendor?
I am still using, I guess they were Time Warner last week and actually Spectrum this week. And so, yeah.
Okay.
Hang up on the phone or the computer?
Hang your phone up.
Okay. All right. Well,
gentlemen, here is Dr. Dennis Milletti.
Dennis.
Dr. Dennis, can you hear us okay?
Yes. My first name is Dennis, and you can feel free to call me that.
Well, we're just going to call you Dennis then.
All right.
I'll call you Dennis the Menace.
Dennis the Menace.
You better call Bill the Menace.
Ooh.
We think that Brian is Mr. Wilson. Hey, you kids, get off our lawn.
Yeah.
Dennis and I have
we've
spent so
been
much
all
time
called a lot
together
worse.
that
So
we are in each other's wills now.
Mm.
Wow. So here we are, 7 minutes before showtime. This has never happened.
When Kevin comes on, I have a very urgent question for him.
He shows up at the last minute.
Yeah, I know. He's had some very nice lightning pictures lately.
He has. Very nice. Wow. Dennis and Bill just left. Maybe they're going to go fight or something.
I don't know. That didn't look pretty. Maybe we ought to follow that with a live cam. There's Dennis.
What's scary? I saw myself in that mirror behind Dennis back there. That's horrifying. Wow.
Yeah, I've never seen Bill get up and leave that quickly. So.
Well, I wanted to close the door to my room.
Hey, Troy, I'm going to issue an avalanche watch for behind you there.
Really? This place is clean today, buddy. You look at the backgrounds of all of these, Brian Peters.
Look at Brian.
Looks a little, now look at that.
Brian looks like the Turkey Creek landfill back there.
Thank you. Do you not read the sign up there at the top?
What does it say?
It says, kindly control yourself.
Okay.
Okay.
So I assume, Brian, you're most kindly speaking about that pile of books back there.
Yes.
Okay.
It looks like it's going to go over any time. That's why I've issued an avalanche watch.
There you go. There you go.
Troy, is that your real hair? Is that a toupee there?
No toupee, buddy.
Wow.
I paint this thing every month, whether it needs it or not, man.
So Troy, when was the last time I saw you?
It's been a while back, Brian, but
I'm trying to think. Did I not see you during the Gerald survey?
Yeah,
that may be the last time we actually were in the same.
Exactly did that. Yeah, but yeah, exactly.
That may be
it. It's been a long time since I've seen James. I go into meetings with James. James is like this big speaker that comes into these big meetings we're in, and he's like in Birmingham and all over the world. I just don't get. James is like gotten way up there now, Brian. And
I know I can't keep up with him.
They're not equal, so yeah.
So I'm cranky too, Brian.
Oh Lord.
Well, it's like I am now the supplier of all the local television stations' images and video they use on the air for my Twitter feed.
Have they been stealing those too? More?
Well, now here's what they do, and it's not, it's okay, I guess, but it's not ethical to me. I mean, so some guy sends me a picture of flooding, at Span. Here's flooding on Tallapoosa Street.
Right.
So the next second, here's the other channel. Hey, we'd like to use that image on our air and all of our platforms. We'll give you credit. Do we have your permission to do that? So, they follow me, and everybody that sends me a picture, they immediately send them that message. And it's
but do they have courtesy ABC 3340 or James Spann? Or
No, they go straight to the guy that took the picture, who sent it to me.
Thank you.
They want to get permission to use it on their air. So it's like I am now the supplier of video and pictures for all the local TV stations. And then the networks start jumping on here, like the flooding video today, every one of them, ABC, Fox, CBS.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But it's like they've got these guys that just lurk out there on social media. And if they see something really good, like, really good video or an image, they're just all over it like flies on poop.
Well, James, that's that fake news, man. It's that fake news.
Fake news, man. It's just like, come on, man. Use the people. You got some followers. Go use your own followers.
What's a follower?
Yeah, I don't know. So we have to wait 3 minutes until we hit the television here, and then we can start. So now I invited Kim, Bill.
I did too, so she must have already bailed.
Saw this, and
what y'all do, Kim, last week?
She ran as far and as fast as she could.
I got to work a couple of weeks ago with Kim at a weather test bed in Norman, so I really like Kim.
So you're in the.
He's sucking up to her already.
Well, apparently she doesn't like you.
I know. You probably thought, good Lord, the week's over with. Get the hell out of here.
Yeah, she saw your name on the byline there, and she was out of there.
Yeah.
Oh,
wait a minute,
out of there. That
minute.
could be the
Troy's
reason.
on this show. I am running. I'm out.
So Troy, how does the fine Corinthian leather feel there in the guest panelist seat?
Yeah, whatever.
Ricardo Montalban, the 1975 Chrysler Cordoba.
And the textbook pile that's going to fall and kill 3 people here in the offices.
Yeah. But there was a watch out for it.
It was, absolutely.
I think you better
Brian
upgrade
Peters' watch.
Brian.
So what year was Gerald? I can't even remember what year Gerald
1997, May 27th.
That's right. Yeah.
That was, 20 years ago.
Yeah, they big anniversary here, 2 months ago. They did a lot of stuff. Brian would recognize, all the TV stations did nice follow-ups and things like that. So.
That was an absolutely amazing. I remember the call I got when I was waiting for the pilot for the Civil Air Patrol. And I got a call from the head of the survey team. And he said he wanted to know where all the cars went. And I said, what cars? He said, well, the tornado went through a small residential area, and one guy had over 50 antique Chevrolets.
Yep.
And they couldn't find any parts.
And
So
even to this day, Brian, the Texas Department of Public Safety still says, I'm thinking the last I heard was about 41 VIN numbers that were never able to be identified because they never found a VIN plate. So there were 41 VINs of vehicles. That's amazing to me.
And from the air, I couldn't find them either.
Yeah.
So, that's still, apart from the fact that if Dr. Fujita was around, he probably would have called that an F6. That storm was just amazing.
And I was Larry Eblin was of course the WCM down at Austin, San Antonio, and
yes, I
actually got in the helicopter with Georgetown Police that next morning and I shot a little video from up high, but not the quality which you shot. But it was truly amazing to look at it the next morning at sunrise thereabouts.
Oh, I know it. It just was absolutely amazing. Yeah. And I do believe that was.
Hang stand by. Let's welcome our television viewers because they're just joining us right now. Hello, friends.
Don't act like you've been here before. Come on.
Well, this is old home week.
We're here. This is WeatherBrains, episode 601. We're in the pre-show, and I think everybody's here except for maybe Kim and Aubrey and Nate and Kevin.
So we have about half the WeatherBrains staff.
But let's just go ahead and start this thing. What do you say? So let's do number 1, and let's do track number 2. And here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is WeatherBrains, episode number 601. This is for the 24th of July, 2017. This is the world's longest running weather podcast. We used to say we're the world's greatest weather podcast. I have there's a zillion weather podcasts now, but wait, we've been around a long time. Thanks a lot for taking the time to watch and or listen. We are now, are we in the dog days of summer? Bill Murray's our weather historian. He knows the answers to these hard questions.
Well, yes, we are in the middle of them, James. So we are.
But when do the dog days start? You ask 10 different people, you get 10 different answers.
Well, it actually has a set day. I think it began on July 22nd and ends on August 22nd.
Okay, so we're 2 days in. So it's a dog day afternoon, a dog day evening.
Al Pacino.
Brian and I Peters, got robbed today.
You got robbed?
I got robbed.
By rain?
Yeah, no, by an outflow.
Stole your Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
No, an outflow stole the rain. Mm-hmm. All that flash flooding over Jefferson County, and the outflow from that came through Helena, where I live, and bingo, no rain after that.
Yeah, we're
down
Brian,
here. The same thing in Austin, Texas today. It was heavy rain and severe thunderstorms 10 miles that way. Austin, Texas, where I am, 707 inch. That was it.
Right, and the flash flooding was 12 miles north of me. Here, not a sprinkle.
Yeah.
So it goes with we call it the thunderstorm lottery every day. Texas, the deep south, it's just, who knows? Air mass thunderstorms, one of the greatest challenges in weather forecasting. I mean, I dream of the day where I can tell somebody exactly when and where it's going to rain at 4 o'clock in the afternoon at 7 a.m., but that's not going to happen on my watch.
Not in your lifetime, I'm afraid.
No. Rick Smith might know. Rick's out there in Norman, where the biggest weather brains in the universe are gathered together.
Rick knows everything.
We have the same problems everybody else does. We've actually had a couple of instances here 2 weeks in a row where we've had thunderstorms here in Norman, and we've had some really intense downburst winds. Yesterday, just east of Norman, blew down a mile-long stretch of big power poles. A week before, damage happening in the city of Norman here. So yeah, we all want the rain, but sometimes you got to put up with the other stuff that goes along with it.
Wow. Yeah. I was looking at some numbers coming in here, and I just saw where it looks like, Brian, at the Birmingham Shuttlesworth International Airport, their rain total was 3.64 today. So what did you have?
Wow. 0. I had 0. That's why I say I got robbed. I mean, and it was an outflow. I mean,
Yep. So it goes.
So that's about 15 inches in the last 90 days in Birmingham.
Yeah. But Bill Murray, bringing our guest here. We got some highfalutin important people on this show this week.
Well, first I want to introduce our guest panelist. He's appeared several times on the show. How many times, Troy?
Well, I think it's the second or third time.
That's probably the third. He's a native Texan that has been involved in broadcast meteorology since he graduated from Texas A&M in 1984. Good to have you back, Troy. So
appreciate it, Bill. This will, if I hear correctly, probably with everyone that's on the show, this will get me out of this probably for another couple of years.
Yeah,
anytime with James.
Oh yeah.
No luck on that.
This is bonding, right? We're all bonding.
That says Brian Peters.
Yeah. And it was WeatherBrains 495 he was on, so it's been a while.
All right. Okay.
That's over 2 years. That's not good. We'll have to improve on that, Troy.
Oh well.
Well, good. Well, you're here for the new millennia of WeatherBrains because we've got
absolutely an honor to be here. Thank y'all, guys.
Show 601. So I missed show 600 last week. I was at the Grand Canyon, so I hope it was quite a throwdown. We'll have to hear all about it. But tonight's guest, WeatherBrain, is a retired professor and sociologist. He's the director emeritus of the Natural Hazards Center. He has authored over 100 publications on mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery for hazards and disasters. His book, Disasters by Design, was published in 1999. Dr. Dennis Milletti, welcome to WeatherBrains.
Thank you very much.
Well, and you're coming to us from Palm Springs, right, tonight in California?
Now, yes.
All right. Well, we promised to get you out of here by what did we say? 8 o'clock your time.
That's fine.
So you can go have dinner with Frank Sinatra or somebody famous from the Rat Pack or something out there in Palm Springs.
He's not alive anymore, so I hope not.
Yeah. Come on,
Bill. So Dennis, do you know Kevin Laws?
I don't.
He's the SOO at the National Weather Service in Birmingham, and he recommended you be on the show because he said you were someone who gets it. Do you fill that bill right there?
Well, that's for others to judge.
Okay, well, we'll see. Yeah, I know that you say, Dennis, that we're not just meteorologists or broadcasters or emergency managers, that we're all applied social psychologists. What do you mean by that?
Well, anytime anyone says anything to anyone in the American public in the hopes that they can influence their behavior, they have crossed over into the realm of being a social scientist.
Right. So we use that term a lot. And in the last 6 or 7 years, we've gotten real cozy with the social scientists over here on the meteorology side. Is there a difference between a social scientist and a sociologist?
Yeah, there's actually no such thing as a social scientist. That's what physical scientists use as a catch-all phrase to refer to sociologists, social psychologists, and psychologists, and about a dozen other disciplines that devote themselves to the study of human behavior.
So now you obviously deal with other disciplines also in what you're doing, communications and other things. It seems like we're breaking down some of the silos and working together a little better in some circles. Do you agree with that statement or not?
I do, and some of the silos got broken down 30 and 40 years ago, and other silos are still strongly in place. So as an example, the geologists that have been working to communicate risk and give warnings about earthquakes have got involved with sociologists years ago about how best to do that task. And recently, the weather people are more and more interested in using social science information. Some people in the weather industry always have been. So for example, in 1974, when I finished my dissertation on a flood in South Dakota, the Weather Service actually flew me to Washington, D.C. to pick my brain. And most recently, NOAA has vigorously taken on how to increase input from the social and behavioral sciences in the practice of weather warnings and communication of risk to the public.
Now, I want to go back to that Rapid City flood because there's an interesting story behind it. Your advisor sort of gave you an offer that you couldn't refuse and sent you packing for South Dakota. So tell us that story.
Well, the story was simple. I was sitting in my office, which was part of a garage behind the building where my senior professor worked. He knocked on the door, arriving for work that day, and said, "Dennis, there's been a flood in Rapid City, South Dakota. I'd like you to go there and study how the public responded to warnings." I looked up at him and said, "But Gene, I don't want to study warnings. I don't want to be a social psychologist. I want to study organizations." He said, "That's fine. However, if you go to Rapid City and study that event, I'll pay all your expenses. I'll hire students from the local university to do the interviews. And when you come back, you have access to the Institute's computer person to help you analyze the data, and my secretary to type your dissertation. And if you study organizations, you have no support to do that. Let me know. I'll be leaving town tomorrow at 10 in the morning. Let me know by tomorrow." So I sold out, and I went and studied that flood and warnings, and I've been doing it ever since.
So take us back to that event, because that's a fascinating event to me, Dennis. I don't know very much about it, but talk about the Rapid City flood for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, they had a terrible flood, and well over 200 people drowned in it, and a swath of downtown Rapid City literally got washed away, several blocks on either side of the creek. And a couple of weeks later, Native Americans were holding some sort of ritual asking the rain gods to flood the city again. And lo and behold, a second set of warnings was issued. And that's what captivated the interest of my senior professor. He wanted to know how people's experience with the first event and warnings for it influenced their response to warnings in the second event. The thing that stands out in my mind, there are two things that stand out in my mind that I learned and then shared with others in that event was, one, I interviewed a woman, and she said, the warning I got said, this was a National Weather Service warning, if you live abutting the creek, evacuate. So her house didn't back onto the creek, or it did back onto the creek, but the house across the street from her didn't abut the creek. So she thought, I'll evacuate across the street to my friend's house.
Oh, no.
And the house got washed away. Well, the empirical data that I collected supported the idea that vague words like abutting shouldn't be used in a warning giving protective action guidance to the public. And I shared that with the Weather Service. And I don't think they've used the word abutting ever since. The other thing that was learned there was human beings don't immediately respond to warnings of impending disaster. They seek to confirm the information and interact with others. And that confirmation process leads to warning response delay. Not a problem when an event's not going to impact for days. Big problem when an event's going to impact within an hour or two.
Well, Dennis, Troy, a question for you here. That was one thing we saw. James and Bill helped me out, but this is what we saw in the Joplin tornado back a few years back, where there were people who had multiple indicators, but didn't really see anything. They saw things on TV, and they kind of waited, Dennis, and they waited and waited, and ultimately they waited too long to make that decision.
I know all about it. I familiarized myself with that event. That event was investigated in detail by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. The investigation was led by Erica Kulakowski, who was actually one of my students at the University of Colorado at Boulder, and was part of the investigation of evacuation of the World Trade Center towers that I was also part of. And the bottom line is this. Many of the people who lost their lives in Joplin were doing what normally people do when they get a warning message, and that's searching for additional information. And I remember reading that some bodies were discovered with their cell phones in hand because they were texting. In fact, searching for additional information. By the way, I want to add that recent research conducted by myself and a few colleagues at the University of Maryland has done extraordinarily detailed experiments. And I think we may have created a ray of hope in that we came up with ways to word warning messages that may decrease people's inclination to hang out and search for additional information before taking a protective action.
So share some of that practical knowledge with us, Dennis. What are some things we can do as meteorologists? I mean, today we had a flood event here in our city, and of course, I was working it, James was working it, and we were communicating information to the public. What are some practical tips you can give to us that we might that might make us do a better job?
That's what's known in the business as a softball. Thank you.
This guy's good.
The message contents matter. So let me say that again. What you say to the public in a warning message is what impacts the public's behavior. So get out your pen and paper. I'm going to give you a checklist.
There you go. Got your pen and paper, James?
Got to go.
Never use words that can mean different things to different recipients of a warning message. So if you say seek shelter, that'll mean one thing to one person and something else to another.
That's true.
Never use words like evacuate, because evacuate means different things to different people. If you want people to relocate to a safer place, what you need to do is describe for them how to do that. In 2013, there was a catastrophic flood in Boulder, Colorado. The city and county of Boulder never used the word evacuate. That's because I trained them what to do in a warning circumstance. So this is what they told people. If you're close to the creek on the north side, walk north past Pearl Street and you'll be safe. If you're on the west side of Boulder Creek, go up University Boulevard until you get to the university. They told them what to do. No ambiguity. It didn't mean different things to different people. And people actually did that. However, what one needs to put in general in a warning message is, one, what the hazard is. In that case, it would have been a flood. And what the consequences of the hazard will be. So in Katrina in New Orleans, describing the consequences would have been water up to the gutters of your roof. Not just saying a flood, but saying water's up to your roof's gutters. And telling them what protective action to take and how taking the action reduces the consequences. That's the essence of a warning message. And if you leave that stuff out, people are going to waste time on their cell phones, talking to people over the backyard fence, finding that out. That's what they're in search of. So not having that sort of precision in the message that goes to the public. By the way, I will also want to add, not in a way that scares them. Exactly. Fear-based messages do not work. They do the opposite. but rather frame it in a positive way. And we have a ray of hope. It needs to be empirically tested a few more times before I can say with confidence. I think we can actually reduce what we in sociology call milling. That is, talking to other people. Let me say it another way. When all the forest animals are running away from the flames, human beings are hanging out, talking to other people, trying to make sense out of the event and deciding what to do.
Dennis, can I ask you another question too? In 2017, Dennis, how would you say that broadcast meteorologists, and also for that purpose, the people that originate the warnings in the National Weather Service, how are we doing with our warnings right now? I'm sure we're not perfect, but have we gotten better since this association with social scientists? Are we getting better?
Some of you are, and some of you aren't.
Uh-oh, a nice and a naughty list.
And so here's how transfer across disciplinary lines works. A meteorologist who gives warnings, and a sociologist like Dennis Milletti, who thinks he knows a bit about the human behavior aspects of it, get to know each other, come to like and appreciate each other, trust each other, and have conversations over beer. That's how knowledge transfer happens. It doesn't pretty much happen any other way. The bottom line is what I just described about the most effective way to transfer knowledge across disciplinary lines is having beers with someone you know. If we stay in our silos and don't interact with each other, nothing is going to move forward. It takes a multi-interdisciplinary approach to conquer hazards of all sorts, and not just weather hazards, all kinds of hazards.
Well, Dennis, let me ask you this. This is a politically incorrect question, and I'll ask it. Given this type of situation, there are a certain percentage of the people we communicate with that we will not be able to help no matter what.
What do you want me to say? The answer is absolutely yes.
Okay.
People in every event that will not do anything to protect themselves, will not evacuate. There was a man, his name was Harry Truman, who lived on the side of Mount St. Helens, and he refused to evacuate even when it started erupting. That's absolutely the case in almost every event I know of.
And that, by the way, that's stolen, because I have heard basically my buddy James Spann say that during tornado coverage. Please do what I'm asking you to do, and try to protect yourself. But at the same time, we're not going to be able to prevent every death in severe weather, probably.
No, you'll never, ever, not only severe weather, but any other hazard. However, it's a game of probability. You can increase the probability that more people will take quicker actions to protect themselves if you practice warning messages appropriately. And I also want to say this. People need to get a message more than once. Mm-hmm. People need to hear things multiple times. That's why Coca-Cola, even after 100 years, still advertises to sell its product. Because how you influence behavior is multiple messaging. And disseminating the message over multiple channels, I don't care what communication channel you have to the public. If you disseminate the message over many channels, things work better from a public response point of view. For many reasons, not the least of which is it's not a simple monolithic public out there. There are many publics, and some communication channels don't reach some members of the public and reach other members. And the more channels you use, the more people hear the message multiple times, the more they become convinced. Now, there are people in my discipline that learned this half a century ago and learned how to make a lot of money with it. And they moved to Madison Avenue and call it advertising.
Dr. Maletti, what you're talking about, the different things that people go through before they act on a warning, before they react to a warning message. What have you found as far as the role of conflicting messages? Like, we have a lot of discussions on this show about, well, the outlooks are different depending on which TV station you watch or which weather service office you're looking at, or this station's issuing warnings that are different from the weather service. How does that play in the research you've done over the years, conflicting information?
It's not good. And let me explain why. Human beings desperately want to believe that they're safe, and that if something bad happens, it'll happen to somebody else and not them. And if you present people with conflicting information that in essence says, you're not safe, you're going to die unless you do something, and the other information says you're safe, don't worry about it, people's natural inclination is to believe the information that they're safe. Why? That's how human beings are wired. Now, there's a way around that, and good warning emergency planning will presume that there'll be conflicting information and put in practices that blow the, let's say, oddball conflicting information out of the water and divert the public's attention from it. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, let's say there's someone who knows what the absolute best information is, and you send it out over a wireless emergency alert, 90 characters long. You send it out over a Twitter message, 140 characters long. You send it out over the short message service, 160 characters long. You send it out through the IPAWS, Integrated Public Alert and Warning System, and you can write up to a 1,380 characters long message, lots of information to all the print media in town, as well as all the broadcast media in town, etc. On and on and on and on. And you have police cruisers going up and down streets, broadcasting canned messages they keep in the trunk of their car, because you don't have to wait for the event to design a message. Having that multiple channel dissemination will help abate the influence of conflicting, perhaps incorrect information. But if you just rely on one warning dissemination channel, one pea shooter, even though you've got the right pea in the pea shooter, and there's conflicting information, its impact will be diluted.
So how do we fix this problem? So you got one TV station that's starting to do their own warnings that conflict with the weather service. You got another TV station doing their own thing. Is there any hope to get everybody back on the same page?
Absolutely. People aren't interested in doing things that result in their neighbors dying. It's called emergency planning, and getting everybody in the same room and training them about what are high priority practices in an emergency, and cooperating to develop an integrated warning system.
So what do you do when nobody will go in the same room? People that work in broadcast, weather service, emergency management, they will not get in the same room.
Well, then you have a problem, and you could look forward to a future of maximizing death and weather-related events.
Wow.
Congratulations. Wow. It's not about public safety. It's about the self-interest of companies.
Preach on, brother. I mean, we got a real problem, and I don't want to get on this because it's not my show to talk here, but again, my heart right now is that within the weather enterprise, we're about to go down the tubes. I just see it coming. I see this train coming. If we don't stop it, we got a real problem where in every market, every TV station is going to be issuing their own watches and warnings. Big groups will be doing their own watches and warnings. AccuWeather, the Weather Channel, all these private sector firms. I see that train coming. And if we don't get this horse back in the barn, we got a real problem. So, Dennis, I might need your help, man. You speak common sense here.
But James, don't you think for a little bit, guys, that the judicial system will take care of that? The Weather Service enjoys, the lack of being held. They can issue the warnings and they're out there, but TV stations start doing that, they'll end up in a courtroom quicker than I don't know quicker than what, but it'll happen pretty quick. Someone will end up suing these TV stations.
I would think that's the case. And Troy, I think there's a responsibility that these broadcasters have of disseminating warnings from the National Weather Service. It's kind of an FCC thing here. Where you're requesting EAS activation. And if you decide, well, the Weather Service, those guys, Rick Smith, those guys don't know what they're doing. I'm better than they are. I'm issuing my own warnings. I agree. I think you got problems with litigation. You've got a lot of problems. You got problems with the FCC. You got all kind of issues, but I'm telling you, it's just like they don't care. They don't.
But James, I say they do, and I'm not going into details, but Rick knows the details. What happened in OKC a few years ago with the tornado warning, get in your car and try to get away. There was a lot of kickback from that.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah.
Rick?
Hey, you guys, I want you to know you're not the only ones that have this problem. We have people here in California where the only thing the public should do to protect themselves in an earthquake is get under a heavy table and desk and hold on to the leg until you're white-knuckled to protect yourself from falling objects hitting you. Every time we have earthquakes, we have television stations telling people after the event to get in a doorway. Well, the doorway is the worst possible place to get. Where they came up with that idea, no one knows. The state of California, since its inception, has never recommended that. But it's an old wives' tale. So it's not like you have it hard and everybody else has it easy. It's a general problem. And you need look no further than your local nuclear power plant, if you have one in your state, where these problems were identified and the nuclear industry was forced to work them out in the early and mid 1980s. And how do you get everybody on the same page? How do you get different counties where there are different sheriffs issuing different warnings to not say conflicting things? And fundamentally, what it's called is emergency planning. Now, Dwight Eisenhower said when he was president, emergency planning works. Not planning doesn't work quite as well.
Yeah. So Dennis, changing from weather for just a second, I don't want to stay away from it for very long, but I want to ask you, since you raised President Eisenhower's name, the concept developed in the 1950s of mutually assured destruction and, nuclear powers battling each other. And I just heard recently that there's some ideas that maybe the powers, the governments, the militaries don't really believe that, and they have plans, that they would play out a nuclear war. What are the thoughts at the sociologist level about that news coming out in the past couple of weeks?
I don't think there's any sociological hubbub about that. I do know that our nation's cities and counties are not really prepared to deal with a nuclear detonation. And a lot of work has been done about a decade ago on what adequate emergency planning would look like to protect the American public if a bomb went off. And it's going to freak you out if I tell you what it is. And this is really fancy physical science from really important, famous physicists at national laboratories. But if, let's say, Los Angeles got hit with a nuclear bomb and a radioactive plume was headed my way, without a doubt, the probability of deaths and injuries from exposure to radiation would plummet if what people did was shelter in place and go inside in the basement of a high-rise building. And if you can't get to the basement, to a middle floor, and go to the middle of that floor and stay there until the plume goes by, and reduce your exposure by being in some kind of structure that reduces the amount of radiation that can get to you. However, it's probably not intuitive to the average citizen in the country that if a bomb goes off, you shouldn't peel rubber and try to get out of town. So it'd be a very difficult thing to pull off without intense public education, none of which has gone on yet.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Since we were duck and covering in the 50s, that really hasn't been part of our training lexicon.
Yeah, I was one of the kids that was trained in kindergarten and first grade to protect myself from a nuclear bomb by getting on my hands and knees and covering the back of my head. And what that was really designed to do was protect myself from shattered glass, not the bomb.
Yeah.
So Dennis, you know, you talk about, in some of your talks, you talk about the issuance delay. Critique the weather industry. It seems like we don't do a very poor job. We do a pretty good job in terms of minimizing that issuance delay. Would you agree or disagree with that statement?
Well, I would bet that if I looked under that rock, I might find some things to comment on. And I've not looked under that rock in reference to weather hazards. So what I mean by that is, if the decision is not formalized, if it's not written down, if it doesn't say when these parameters exist, you do this and communicate this message to this person within X number of minutes or seconds, then you're flying on the good practice of the people involved in that particular event. And that's not adequate, because that doesn't remove from the scenario whether that person has acid indigestion, had a good night's sleep, or just finished having a fight with their spouse. And that needs to be removed out. Now, are you fishing for me to say most people in that job probably try to do the best job they can? I'm sure that's the case. That is not sufficient. It needs to be formalized in a plan.
Well, we recently had a big brouhaha a few months ago about lead times from National Weather Service tornado warnings decreasing. And it appeared to be a tempest in a teapot to a great degree because of some structural changes in how warnings are created. But switching gears from that for a second, talk about lead time and false alarms and those sort of things that we're concerned about. You know, do we have a potential false alarm problem if our false alarm rates are too high?
Well, do you want me to answer that as a climatologist or as a sociologist?
As a sociologist.
We've been unable to document an impact on human behavior from false alarms. In fact, when people who issued what you're calling a false alarm have gotten in front of the microphones you're all sitting in front of right now, after the false alarm went out, and explained to the public why, the evidence we see is that the false alarm can actually be productive in enhancing people's response to future events. So that's not what you see when you go to the movies. It's certainly not what you see when you hang out with climatologists who want to get better at forecasting. I'm not saying they shouldn't try to get better at forecasting. I just wouldn't worry about false alarms. Now, if you had what you're calling a false alarm every week for 27 weeks in a row, what I just said probably would not be true. People would wash their hands of you. But if you're talking about a false alarm every 6 months or every year, I wouldn't worry about it. Define it as an opportunity and explain to the public why nothing happened. And you can turn sow's ear into a diamond.
So, Dennis, you talk about the effects of the diffusion delay, getting this information out. Define that. And I was kind of surprised at some of the numbers that you shared in one of your presentations about the different types of dissemination and the time they take, the differences in day, night, men, women, et cetera, et cetera. Talk about the diffusion process.
Yeah, the diffusion process is not just coming up with a warning and throwing it out onto the great unwashed masses using your favorite communication channel de jour. It's recognizing that there is no silver bullet. There is no one communication channel that is perfect and going to reach everybody. And when asked, I always say, the most effective diffusion channel is a cop knocking on everyone's front door with a badge on and delivering it personally. Now, that would take either a city with 100,000 officers and cars knocking on doors. However, you don't have such a city. The new WEA system can deliver a warning very quickly, but then it's only 90 characters long, and it's not much of a warning. It's going to incite searching for additional information, if that. Reverse 911 is another communication channel. There are about 17 different communication channels available today. They all have their advantages and disadvantages. Getting the warning distributed to everybody at risk is the task. The best way to do it is to use every dissemination channel at your disposal.
So Dennis, how do you feel about sirens?
I think sirens are wonderful in the following regard. Sirens are not a warning system. There basically are two functions in communicating to the public. The first is getting people's attention. Did your mother ever try to say something to you and she didn't have your attention and you didn't hear what she said?
Oh,
Might
yes.
got a whack on the back of the head for that. That's because she didn't do an alert. Let me show you my mother, Italian as she was, version of an alert. Watch. Whatever came out of her mouth after that alert, I knew was real.
That is fantastic.
You need to get people's attention. And sirens can help get people's attention. Because, you know, hey, why are they sounding the sirens now? It's not the first Tuesday of the month. And in other words, it got your attention. And then you might have a chance of delivering a warning through a different communication device. The idea that you sound a siren and people are going to take a protective action is probably not the best idea you could come up with. Even though there are communities that do just that for some weather-related hazards. Cell phones and wireless emergency alerts that are delivered over cell phones that vibrate like crazy and probably are going to change in terms of what they look like, are going to become much more useful from the public's point of view. Or the new version of sirens, and I refer to them as you've got a siren in your pocket, because the WEA system, which is DHS's, Department of Homeland Security system, you get that message whether you signed up for it or not. You can delete the function, but if you're like me, you take a cell phone the way it comes and you don't customize it much. So those are the modern sirens. Now, there is an exception. Boulder, Colorado, once again, but that's because I lived there and I knew the people in emergency management. They have mega sirens that talk to you. So when an event's going on, you can go outside or even inside and hear God speak. And the message I described for you a little bit earlier about what they said in Boulder people should do was broadcast over the sirens. So if the sirens were wailing and they were in all directions, and it wasn't just a wailing sound, but delivered the message I described earlier about the warning message in Boulder, sirens could be very good. So it depends on what siren, whether they speak or not, and how many there are, where they're located, and how loud they are. And I'm just going to bet, unless you're a nuclear power plant and you could pass on the cost of sirens to the consumer of electricity in your local community, you're not going to have enough money to buy the kinds of sirens that would actually do the job.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned the WEA system, and you're involved in that system's forward development. Dennis, talk about how you think it might change in coming years.
Well, I know how it's changing. We completed a study, and we said we tested every aspect of the message in the laboratory on human beings, and reached the conclusion that the current 90-character long WEA messages, wireless emergency alert messages, don't accomplish anything. How people respond to them is to say, what the blank is that? Now, that's not delivering a warning. It's not hardly even alerting them. 140-character long messages get their blood running. How do we know that? Well, MDs hooked people up in laboratories, and in controlled laboratory experiments, detected the amount of eye twitching, heartbeat, perspiration, twitching in muscles in the face. 140 characters, you could get people's attention. But that's insufficient to get them to do anything about it. Longer messages that talk about what the hazard is, what the consequences are, protective actions that abate the consequences, when they should begin the protective action and by when they should have it completed, actually can make a difference. So we took that information and presented it to the FCC and to the board that overlooks WEA for DHS. And the FCC changed their ruling and said WEA messages can now be 360 characters long. Now that's great, but that number was limited by the number of characters that could fit on the face of a cell phone. We never tested 360 characters long message, so we don't know what we're going to get for that, but it's got to be better than 90. Because we know 140 got us moving in the right direction. We don't really know what 360 will accomplish. The National Academy of Sciences just did a report on what the next generation of research should be with WEAs, and that was included as a high priority piece of research. Uh-oh, I let a character, something out of the bag. I'm not supposed to give away Academy conclusions before they're scratch that.
It's just us and 20,000 others.
Just us girls here. Nobody's listening to this show.
So Dennis, have y'all looked at NOAA Weather Radio at all and part of that process, or is that external to what you're doing?
I've not examined NOAA Weather Radio. However, every time I do a study on warnings, NOAA Weather Radio is one of the communication channels. Of course, that needs to be examined. NOAA Weather Radio is not bad.
Well,
before we do weather radio, I want to jump in and go back to WEA for just one more second. Yeah. Dennis, we don't know how this sausage is made. It's like this mystery. We don't know the infrastructure. We don't know who triggers these things. We don't know how it works. It's like secretive. And so it would make us feel more confident to recommend WEA as a primary method if we know a little more about it. And also, nationwide, is it consistent? Like where we are, I think we're supposed to get 3 things on WEA: tornado warnings, flash flood warnings, amber alerts. Is that the way it is nationally, or is there more to it in other parts of the country?
You're wrong about the way it is where you are.
Okay. Straighten me out.
The 3 things you get on a WEA message is number 1, communication directly from the president of the United States.
Don't tell President Trump that.
Oh man, Bill.
Oh brother, where's my
that out?
9:18 Central Time. Mark the tape.
You guys are ruthless.
He probably can't get his message out.
The other is messages for impending disasters, and it's not just the ones you listed, it's others. And the third is amber, and you can opt out of amber, and you can opt out of the disaster messages. You cannot opt out of presidential messages.
Well, what severe weather warnings do I get?
Yeah, that'd be a question. Yeah.
I have no idea.
I can tell you.
I can tell you too.
Yeah, tornado, flash flood, dust storm, hurricane, typhoon, extreme wind, and tsunami.
Yeah, counties don't. There are lots of counties in your part of the nation that don't issue WEA messages. They just don't use the system. They use something else.
So who initiates all this? Where does it come from? Does it come from the county EMA guy or the sheriff here or the EMA? Where does this originate?
It could. Most weather-related messages that are WEA messages originate with NOAA and the National Weather Service.
Okay, so in theory, I should get every tornado warning and every flash flood warning on my phone with WEA, but not severe thunderstorm warnings, right?
No. I don't know how you reach that conclusion.
Because I've had a phone for a long time, and that's what I get on my phone.
Great. That's inference. Assuming.
No, severe thunderstorm warnings are listed as not coming over WEA.
Yeah, we don't get them here. We get a bunch of severe thunderstorm warnings, and they are not on WEA where we are.
Great. Wonder who made that decision.
And I think that's what the question is on this. That I think that James is asking is who makes this decision? Who's deciding what? And
who's the Pope here?
Yeah, I mean, you said some counties, Dennis, may not be included. So it comes down to a county level if you're included in that or not.
Most counties are the point of origin for public warnings.
Okay.
And if your county isn't issuing a WEA warning message to its population, it decided not to. Okay. Got it?
Yep.
And if it's every county in your state, that's the way it is. Go talk to your county emergency managers. Now, in addition to that, the National Weather Service can issue WEAs, and it often does. And why it doesn't do it for thunderstorms where you live, but it does it for other things where you live, I don't know. Ask them. That's why they do that. I don't do that.
And you say, ask them, is that somebody at NOAA headquarters or is it somebody at the local weather service office when I ask? Because I don't know what to tell. We don't know how this sausage is made. It's confusing to us.
Yeah, well,
my understanding is this is done at headquarters, that they make that decision. But I mean, I've got other folks here, Rick, that can correct me if I'm wrong.
What say you, Rick?
Well, it's coordinated at the national level with NOAA, FEMA, Homeland Security, the FCC. I don't know who all's involved in it, but it's hands off at the local office. When we push the button to issue a warning, we have no control over where it goes. It goes into the WEA system. I don't know what happens to it once it leaves the office, but if it's a tornado warning or a flash flood warning or a dust storm warning or some of the other things Brian mentioned, but those are the most common ones, it's going to go out over the WEA system, and there's no options to do something different, or, well, I don't want to send this tornado warning over WEA, or let's do this severe because it's a really bad storm. We don't have that capability right now.
So do you get severe thunderstorm warnings on WEA if you're in, say, Oklahoma City?
No. People would be throwing their phones.
Right. Now, I totally agree with that. I think that's right. And one more question. I'll promise I'll leave this alone. Is it based on the GPS chip in your phone? If you're in the Polygon and you're in the, based on the GPS location, you get it, or is it some kind of cell tower thing? How does that work?
It's a cell tower thing, I believe. And Dennis, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's a cell tower thing. It doesn't know that you're sitting in Birmingham, Alabama, and what street you're sitting on. If there is a warning, and it's done different by different carriers, so I may be messing some of this up. But if a cell phone tower near you is in the Polygon or near the Polygon or however they determine, then it broadcasts that warning over that cell phone tower to any device that can hear it. So it's not saying, well, I see James is here, I'm going to send this warning to him. It's a broadcast like a radio station, and your phone receives it if you're in the area. But there's a lot of gray area there as far as, well, some carriers do the county, some just do the Polygon, and that's in a state of flux right now, I believe.
So what you're saying, Rick, in a way, is it's possible that you could get a warning that the Polygon maybe doesn't officially cover your area. You may be close.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you can get
our dilemma where we are, what we have to do, what I have to do is decide, am I going to tell people if you got WEA on your phone, you're good? Or do you need to go get a third-party app like, some of these that are available and use that? And that's the dilemma I have, and it would help me. And what I've learned more about WEA in the last 10 minutes than I've learned since it's initiated.
I agree.
Is how to advise people. That's all I'm trying to learn here.
Well, let me give you some advice. Do you remember when I said there's no silver bullet? WEA is not a silver bullet. And if it were silver, it would have a lower caliber than a 22. So even if it worked the way you'd like it to work, it's not going to accomplish much, because how people respond to a WEA message, I know, the social science community knows, the Department of Homeland Security knows, the FCC knows, and the carriers know, is what the blank is that? That's why recrafting it into a more powerful warning delivery tool is warranted. And I can say this, warning messaging through the WEA system is the wave of the future. It will eventually take over the universe, but eventually it'll be refined and built in a way that makes it more useful than it is today.
So are there already any thoughts about implementing like the new National Weather Service Facets program, Dennis, into WEA? Are you looking out onto the horizon 5 to 7 years from now to see how that's going to happen?
I don't know what the Facets program is. The Weather Service doesn't ask me questions about their programs I don't know about.
Well, bring that up at your next board meeting, because
well, what you're talking about, Bill, primarily, and I was in the weather test bed back with Kim actually back in May. But what they're talking about, Dennis, is primarily maybe putting a graphics, some type of graphic along with that message as well. Is that, Bill, where you're kind of coming from?
Well, you really are going to have a number for each kilometer grid space.
Okay.
There's going to be a probability of a certain hazard affecting you, whether that's large hail or a tornado or whatever. Yeah. And these grids are going to be put out there, and that's of course going to be a challenge. I've heard things like you might hear an increasing metronome sound as your threat increases, or you might see a graphical representation of it like you're talking about, Troy. But it sounds like WEA and that could be potentially very important together, because we're going to have to get that message out to the public. And we just had just a few weeks ago, Lance Rothfuse. We've had other people on the show recently talking about facets. Y'all had Patrick last week. It's going to be interesting. So watch that on your horizon, Dennis, because it's going to be an important thing.
Yeah, let me suggest something to you. Prior to rolling out those kinds of images, I certainly would hope that somebody invites a social scientist, a social psychologist perhaps, to do a little bit of research about what kind of graphic has the biggest payoff from the public's point of view. Now, I can also say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. One of the really tough things in warning messaging is having people personalize the message and believe they're the ones that really are at risk. We did some preliminary rough experiments by showing people a plume after an atom bomb scenario exploded in downtown LA. And in the middle of the plume stuck a flag with the words YOU. Now that's not a sophisticated graphic, and I wouldn't expect no one to do anything like that, but it set the findings off the charts. People got it. And no amount of words can accomplish that kind of personalization. So graphics holds promise for the future. Do we have it nailed down? No. Would I trust the recommendations of a physical scientist to invent graphics? Absolutely not. Yeah. Is it something that's warranted for social scientists to investigate? Absolutely. And it's here. And this is a good example of how interdisciplinary, cross boundaries kinds of research and working together can yield good results.
So, Dennis, you said 140 characters makes people's blood boil, and Twitter's probably made our blood boil to a great degree.
Well, it depends on how those characters are used.
So, how is social media changing the landscape from your perspective?
Not much. My last student has had a grant for 7 years from the National Science Foundation. She's at the University of Kentucky and working with a colleague at the University of California at Irvine. They do nothing but collect tweets after warnings. She has billions of them. She has every tweet, for example, after the Boston Marathon bombing, and every tweet that's come out since before the Oroville Dam possible flood that we had here in California. So she's looked. People tweet to each other, not warning information, but good advice. And they tell people, don't go to that intersection, it's flooded. Right? It's not really used as a direct way to communicate warnings to people. So although social media is here to stay, I wouldn't put much stock in it. It doesn't let the warning provider off the hook.
So, James, any response to that?
Hey, stand by. Well, just a second. I'm take care of business here. Stand by. we got a big interstate closure here at.
But I've got a question for y'all though, and for Dennis too. I mean, the one thing from a geographical point of view that I find is how really geographically ignorant a lot of people in the public are. You can. I sit here and I watch my buddy James when he's on live during severe weather in Alabama, and I've got the radar up here watching what he's watching. But and I do the same thing on radio here, where you give someone, you say this tornado is in central Travis County, it's located near here, and the question becomes, do people really understand do they have a good sense of awareness about where they are and where the danger is?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think is Dennis' comment about this simple map with a flag. People got that. But I wonder if they kind of get lost in the warnings that they get now in reference to weather.
Well, that's what incites people to mill and go in search of information over the backyard fence. And that's where they are when the tornado hits. Not all people, but some of them.
And I think that's why all of us have to deal with this constant, what about me? What about Norman? What about Moore? What time's it going to be here? We always joke about what time's it going to hit my house. That's that personalization, right? I mean, people want to know, is this really going to impact me where I am at this moment? And if not, I don't care about it. That's what I get out of it. It's annoying and it's a lot of work. It's impossible to answer all the questions, but I don't know. That's what I get out of it.
Yeah, and I fear that most Americans are not very geographically astute. Most people don't know where Ohio is.
So Dennis, in your studies, I was really sort of surprised at the percentage of the population that is reached through informal notifications. Define what that is and talk about the impact and ramifications that has.
Yeah, well, in the past few years, and even today, my focus has been on first warnings received. And 30 or 40 years ago, you could count on maybe 7.5% of the population receiving their first warning from a relative or a friend 30 or 40 years ago over the telephone, or knocking from the neighbor knocking on your door. That number has gone dramatically up, and many people receive first warnings. So there's a multiplier effect. You throw a warning out there, and let's say you reach a third of the population that you wanted to reach. That third of the population is going to provide first warnings to another third of the population. That's the effervescence that you think social media provides. And social media right now hasn't been documented to really do that. However, that effervescent, another third gets warned, informally. That's called people call up their mother and make sure that she heard about it, as you would call your son, and vice versa. And if you're going to evacuate, you're probably going to check on the house next door if you know that person doesn't have a car, see if they need a ride out. And that phenomenon, people are not social islands, we're social animals, and we interact with each other. So that informal notification plays a profoundly important role. And it's profoundly important, particularly in rapid onset imminent hazards that are detected and an impact can occur, let's say, in an hour or two.
Hey, Dennis, this is Kevin Selly. I've just joined from Wichita Falls. I had to get here late, but I've been kind of dipping in. But hearing your last comment, I wanted to jump in, if I may. The delay part of social media, where Facebook is, filtering with their algorithm that keeps posts from getting to people in a timely fashion. What you were talking about can't work, and what worries me on the other side is that because of the delay, then we're sending out old information. And one of my biggest problems has been what I consider to be the legitimizing of Facebook and Twitter as a weather distribution platform because we are there using it.
Great, I understand your concern. I wouldn't rely on any electronic media which has limited characters as a way to get a warning message out. It's a nice supplemental approach, but not a primary mechanism.
Does my comment about the idea of legitimizing it concern you? I go back years and years ago after the 2011 outbreak in Alabama, and I think about this at least once a week. There was a town hall at the NWA meeting later that year that Bill had organized, and I couldn't go to the meeting, but they were streaming it. And I will never forget this woman, older woman, who got up to the microphone, and she said, "Well, when I heard there were tornadoes that day, I started searching around on Twitter." And that scares me and makes me sad to this day, 6 years later, because I didn't want her surfing around or scrounging around on Twitter looking for information amongst the tweets going by from her nephew that said, "I'm eating cheese," as opposed to going to a reliable source of information like a James Spann website or wherever it would be to get timely information. And again, so I'm kind of asking the same question again, but I really think we've legitimized this in some people's minds because they're not thinking about this, and they're not thinking about the distribution and the delay. They don't even know about it. But in our being there, and then even the armchair meteorologist or the social meteorologist being there, I think it's creating more confusion. Does that bother you?
Well, it confuses people in an imminent impact warning event. Of course it would bother me. You don't get to say what that woman does and where she goes trolling for information. It used to be before electronic communications, it would be the woman over the backyard fence who would tell her, "Don't worry about tornadoes. I've lived here my whole life, over 40 years. We don't get tornadoes on this." That's the same phenomenon. It's just manifesting itself electronically. So that goes back to something I said perhaps before you joined us, and that is, in a warning event, use every communication channel to the public available to you. That's what the emergency manager should be doing. And hopefully that can get to that woman. But if everybody's going to tweet and 140 characters is going to be the limit of information that they get, your concern is that it's old 140 characters. Our society is in essence doomed because we're going to raise generations of human beings that don't read books and knowledge, warnings, algebra, all reduced to the length and breadth, the breadth and length of a bumper sticker. I mean,
Yeah. Well, let me, for the sake of the discussion, push back on something you said. You said we don't get to choose how she goes and gets her information, which is an interesting point. But the pushback would be, should we be giving her the option with our data on a platform or platforms that are not effective?
How do you know they're not effective?
Because in some cases they're not going to see it because it's filtered based upon their behavior and online. And it is like when I put something on Facebook, I share a lot of my photos, and whenever I put something up that is, I mean, I'm a local television weather person in Wichita Falls, and I have to, I shouldn't say it this way, but I deal with that action for 2 to 3 days afterwards, because people are seeing the pictures, they're commenting on it, and so on and so forth. But again, I would go back to, should we again legitimize that? I understand your point about we can't tell her what to do, but should we be putting information that for some percentage, probably a large percentage, is not going to be timely? Basically where I'm going is I keep telling James that we just need to leave.
If that's what you think, why do you do it?
I don't do it.
Oh, okay, good. Got it.
But I heard you guys earlier, and James said, well, what are we going to do? And one of the big complaints on the show for weeks and weeks and years now has been, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And lately we hear, well, we all go to these conferences and we talk and nothing gets done. Well, we're kind of to the point where we needed to get done. James, you said a minute ago, you said, well, this isn't my show to, complain about this, or it is your show. Mm-hmm. So what are we going to do?
I'm just a button presser guy here.
No, you're not. No, you're not. You can't do that anymore. You can't do that anymore because you in large part led this move in this direction, for better or for worse, but people followed you because you got popular with it. You were I've said this before on the show, you were James Spann, the James Spann that does James Spann's work at the television station and in the market long before social media. You just got famous because of social media.
Well, we've got work to do. And Dennis, what we've talked about on the show a lot, problems with dissemination of severe weather information, a simple unified message where we can reach a lot of people. And there are so many problems to deal with, and you pointed out many of them, but Kevin is been pushing us in the direction of, we have sold our soul to Twitter and Facebook and Snapchat and Instagram.
Yes.
And they now control the dissemination process, and they can change it tonight if they wanted to, and cut us off or shut us down. And so the question we struggle with, and this is where the masses are there. They are on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat and others. So do we just ignore that and say, you got to come to us, or do we stay over there in that playground where everybody happens to be? Dennis, what say you?
What I have to say is they're here to stay. If you want to look at the best there is in social media, and you want to look at alerts and warnings, I had the privilege of meeting all the major players from all the major social media companies in Silicon Valley. And the company that blew me out of the water, and I met the man who invented Snapchat, and I met the guy from this one and this one, but it's Google Alerts. They've read every scrap of social science there is, and they put together the best possible for their customers.
Right.
Alerts you could do in that format. So that's a wonderful example of, if you're going to use that forum for distributing warning information, the best that you can do to date.
But here's the thing with regard to like Google Plus, because I was fortunate enough to spend a half an hour on the phone one day with Vic Gandotra from Google. And what he taught me, and I know we're not saying Google Plus specifically, but what he taught me about that platform and others, because I was able to get his attention with something that I did. And so he said, okay, I'm going to give you a little time on the phone, and we talked. And what I was hoping to do was to say, okay, if you could just make this, little tweak here for us, on Google Plus, this is why it would get better. And what he made me realize is they can't accommodate any special interests on a global platform, because the minute you do it for one, you have to do it for everybody, and that doesn't scale.
Got it. Well, let me just, if I may, you guys have, and the media have, a profound role in distributing warning information. However, it really should be the job of your emergency managers in your communities to put together an approach for distributing warnings by the people who were elected to serve the public's health and safety. And you're a very important player in that. And so what I think I'm suggesting is you're not the only player. You're looking at it from your own point of view. You have a profoundly important role to play. And now there's this new technology on the block. The way I view things, it's the wave of the future. And it needs to be, it's not nowhere near where it needs to be a really effective warning mechanism. There is no way to create one single effective warning mechanism. So emergency managers need to take this up. However, there are some places and some counties where emergency managers have their act together, and other places where they don't. It's like anything else in the country. If you go to Los Angeles, New York City, and places like that, they've already thought about all this, and good programs are in place. But in small communities that aren't as well funded as those, it's probably more difficult.
All right, well, listen, we are at 43 after the hour here, and I've got to lead the newscast because of flooding. So let's take a quick break, and we're going to roll WeatherBrains, Professor Peters 101, and Tony Rice in the astronomy report. And Bill Murray, I'll let you kind of pick it up after that because I've got to go into old Studio A here. So after the astronomy report, Bill, the show belongs to you. So we will be right back. Much more to come as WeatherBrains rolls along.
WeatherBrains 101 with Professor Peters.
It's been a long time since the summer of 1980, but as a meteorologist serving in the National Weather Service office in Memphis, Tennessee, I will not forget the prolonged heat episode that resulted in over 1,700 deaths that summer. Because of the drought that accompanied the heat, agricultural losses reached $20 billion. You may find this remarkable, but between 1999 and 2009, more than 7,200 people died from heat-related causes in the United States. That's an average of 658 per year, according to recent statistics from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Its partner, cold, can be dangerous because it sneaks up on you. Eli Jacks, the chief of Fire and Public Weather Services with the National Weather Service, has said, heat can be a silent killer because it doesn't topple trees or rip roofs off houses like tornadoes and hurricanes. Nevertheless, it's a dangerous weather condition for which people should prepare. Certain groups of people should be especially careful during hot weather conditions. For example, city dwellers and those living in the upper floors of tall buildings or in heat-prone regions are most at risk for heat-related illness. People who have difficulty getting around or who have health conditions are particularly susceptible. The elderly and the very young also merit special attention during periods of high heat and humidity. The National Weather Service issues heat advisories, heat watches, or heat warnings when conditions reach unhealthy levels by using the heat index. The heat index, also known as the apparent temperature, is what the temperature feels like to the human body when relative humidity is combined with the air temperature. Too hot, it begins to perspire or sweat to cool itself off. If the perspiration is not able to evaporate, the body cannot regulate its temperature. Evaporation is a cooling process. When perspiration is evaporated off the body, it effectively reduces the body's temperature. When the atmospheric moisture content, or the relative humidity, is high, the rate of perspiration from the body decreases, so a body will feel warmer in humid conditions. The opposite is true when the relative humidity decreases because the rate of perspiration increases. The body actually feels cooler in arid conditions. Unlike other dangerous weather events, the heat can come on slowly, so pay close attention when those heat indices begin getting over the 103-degree value. Heat safety depends on using common sense, but we also need to be alert to the condition of elderly friends or relatives who can be overcome by the heat. If you have a question about the weather, drop an email to question@weatherbrains.com.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
We're just 4 weeks out, and if you've not made plans yet on where you're going to experience the total eclipse, Science Institute may have some ideas for you. NASA's eclipse website at eclipse2017.nasa.gov has pretty much everything you need, including interactive maps, links to live streams, explainers, and a list of events in your area. Official NASA viewing locations, astronomy clubs, museums, zoos, and other community events, as well as libraries that are planning eclipse events. Last one. Libraries have evolved over the years from just a place to check out books to more of a center of community learning. Public library branches, bookmobiles, tribal libraries, and state libraries across all 50 states will be distributing 1 million eclipse glasses at upcoming events. Areas both inside and outside of that path of totality. A good example is the Fort Fairfield Public Library in eastern Maine. It's just a few miles from the Canadian border. It's also the most distant participant in this program. 29% of the sun covered, librarians there are planning activities for the big day. Libraries.org for a list of participating libraries. Great resources there for download both in English and Spanish. Look for the moon to be very near the bright star Regulus on July 25th. Regulus is at the bottom of a backward question mark shape in the constellation Leo. The sliver of moon will be visible up and to the left. 3 days later, look for a slightly larger sliver of moon high in the sky near Jupiter, just 2 degrees away. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me in RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
Thank you, Tony Rice. Thank you, Brian Peters, for those excellent additions this week, and for giving me a chance to go to the restroom during after too many glasses of tea at dinner. So,
well, how do you know they were excellent then? No, I'm really
because I actually know Brian's was excellent because it gets posted on our website.
I'm just
too much information, Bill. Too much information.
And I actually know that Tony's is good because his will be on our website tomorrow. So I'm excited about that. So anyway, so Kevin Selly, what's going on in your neck of the woods? Our weather roundup time.
Well, we've had some fascinating thunderstorms over the weekend. These little tight downburst type things, and we're not sure yet, but we think that one of them probably took down a small plane last night. East of Iowa Park, west-northwest of Wichita Falls, kind of west of Burke-Burnett. There was a pretty good downburst, and I was engaged in other things, but it was warned just west of Burke-Burnett. I don't know if that timed out with the crash or not, but the poor pilot, we think he crashed maybe 7-ish. It might have been closer to 9. Ended up near the airport in some sort of a ditch and stayed in the plane injured all night until he could crawl out and walked to, I guess, a local farm or something this morning and found the homeowner and was able to ask for help. So he's in the hospital now, and the plane sits in the it sits in the ditch. Again, we're not confirmed as to how it went down, but we had a bunch of little downbursty, gusty thunderstorms around, and so we wonder if that maybe was the cause. But the FAA will get involved, and so that's been some excitement for today.
So Kevin, is the intense heat affecting you also like it is Rick?
Well, I'm always grumpy, so I guess that's part of it. I actually don't mind it. I think I'm as I get older, I less prefer cold, but I will, if it gets to close to 100 degrees, I will still on some days go out and work in the yard, which is probably not good for me, but I'm grumpy and not very bright either. So
I feel the same way, Kevin. Our children today, don't go outside when it's hot. And
right.
We did when we were kids, and I think it may have made us more resilient. I was like you. I wanted to go out yesterday and work in the yard, and I probably had heat stroke when it was all over because of it, but it was worth it. So.
I had some fun. I got to go. We live just not too far from the local Lake Wichita. It's over 100 years old now, I think, this lake. But there's a dam, and I get to go up in the dam and take some lightning pictures. I've got them on my Twitter feed if anybody cares.
So Dennis, speaking of dams, you mentioned Oroville, and you're doing some research about response there from this year's past near disaster that occurred there.
Yes, very interesting. What we did for the Army Corps a couple of years ago was summarize every piece of social research done over the last 60 years about delay in the decision to warn, delay in the diffusion of warnings into human populations, and delay by the endangered public at initiating protective action. And from that work, we were able to draw some statistical curves. And the Corps can use that in making estimates of life loss under and close to all its dams and levees to help them make better decisions about how to spend the money they have to proceed with whatever it is they do. And the problem was all of that work and all of those curves and the importance of their application by the Corps. All the data was before electronic communication. So when we got done, I said, you better take this all with a grain of salt. We have to recalibrate things based on current events and modern communication technologies. So they agreed, and we were waiting for an event to occur. And it's almost chilling to think their offices in Davis, California, which is the first dry spot that you'd probably encounter if the Oroville Dam broke up the mountain, was the office I was working with. And then the Oroville event occurred. And thank goodness there was no flood. Now, if you're a sociologist and you want to send people questionnaires and that sort of thing, to have them all back home is a surveyor's dream. And so we're just finished a week of field work talking to the different organizations and people up there that manage the event and the evacuation, and are about to field some surveys to get statistical data on timing.
Dennis, it must be fascinating and frustrating for you in the work that you do, because at one level, it sounds like that you sort of almost work on an idealized version of things, and then that version of thing hits reality. Like they say, no software ever survives its first encounter with the users. It must be fascinating and frustrating at the same time.
It is. You hit the nail on the head. Because I actually think I know how to design a warning system to maximize the odds it'll work best and save the most lives.
Right.
Getting it put into practice.
Right.
So frustrating.
Yeah.
However, there have been the skies opening and the rays of the sun coming through every now and then, where there have been major advances forward. The Army Corps of Engineers, can you believe me when I say, I can't believe it, the federal agency that's the most receptive to sociological and social psychological research on warnings is the Army Corps of Engineers. Who would have picked that agency?
Wow.
And that they're interested in it is so rewarding.
Oh.
Now, is that a function of being after Katrina, or has that been shown over the long term? Then?
Well, actually, it does go back to Katrina. Somehow I ended up on the American Society of Civil Engineers Oversight Board to overview all the work the Corps was doing on Katrina's aftermath and its consequences. And I got to know them very well. And the board had 18 people on it. And by the time our work was done, I had successfully contaminated every other member with a So a friend of a friend told a friend in Davis that happened. That's only one example. There are other examples. But every time those advances for social science finding its way into the applied and real world have occurred, in my personal experience, it's been along interpersonal interactions. Not by some mysterious thing or not writing the best book on the topic, but through interpersonal interactions. And that's why I'm so keen on it. And that's why getting to know people and reaching out, I do more outreach even at my age than almost any social scientist I know. I go everywhere and try to meet as many people as I can and win them over and contaminate them with a sociological point of view.
So, Brian, you were going to ask Kevin a question?
Yeah, Kevin, I saw your pictures, your lightning shots. I really enjoyed them. I wanted to send you a vote when you posted the 4.
Oh,
I like the purplish one in the upper left. But I thought of a question in looking at your pictures. I just wondered why, when a lightning strikes a cornfield, it isn't filled with popcorn.
And there's your show title.
There you go.
It took us a long time tonight to get the show title, but there we are.
Well, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it. It's really, when we get these marginal storms on a weekend, it is such a treat for me to be able to go out and actually enjoy them and take some pictures. So I appreciate that.
Well, were you very fortunate in getting the pictures? How did you get? I've tried to shoot lightning and have had no luck whatsoever. I'm not using anything external like a lightning sensor that's supposed to fire the shutter. So how are you getting such great shots?
I have a DSLR and a cable release, and I use the bulb setting so I can leave the shutter open. I have it on a tripod, and then I sit and, since I'm theoretically, I know a little bit about storms and what they're supposed to do and where the lightning should be, then I kind of point in the general direction and just hope.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
So, Rick Smith, you're up in Oklahoma City. What's happening this summer so far for you guys?
Kind of the same as what Kevin described. Intermittent heat, interrupted by brief thunderstorms every now and then. Hadn't been too horrible. We've hit 100 a few times, but it's been much worse, and it's been better. So it's kind of the middle of the road. We've had enough rain for some people to break up the monotony of summer and to keep things green a little bit longer.
So Brian Peters, are you looking forward to the first football game of the season?
I am.
I want you to know I played it on Xbox last night, and Alabama won 42-14. So
that's not going to happen.
You have no hope, Brian.
Absolutely not going to happen.
Troy, what's going on in the great state of Austin?
Well, the great state of Austin, 102 at Camp Mabry today, 101 out at Bergstrom, and a few thunderstorms around this evening, but nothing all that spectacular. A little gusty wind around some of the storms. I think Rick and Dennis had mentioned the same sort of thing around here as well. But teaching second summer semester at the University of Texas and introductory weather class, and so it's a wonderful life.
So any other comments you needed to add tonight to the discussion, Troy, before we let you get away?
The only thing I was going to do real quick, and Rick knows what I'm talking about here, I had mentioned it and passed it along to y'all in our chat, but John Hart and the folks up at SPC at the Storm Prediction Center they're just so great on their website, as a lot of folks in the Weather Service are. But one thing that if you haven't seen it, and I'm not sure you can get to it unless you sort of know it's there, John Hart has worked on basically making the surface maps that they use at SPC available beyond that out to the general public. And it's a pretty easy website to remember. I'm just going to read it to you, but spc.noaa.gov, and you go into /EXPER, still an experimental. So EXPER /surface maps, make it plural, surface maps. And the M is uppercase. That's key. Folks, if you haven't been to this page, what John and them have done at SPC, you can click on a region anywhere, and it'll automatically export a PDF of that region, or you can look at the whole United States and gives you a very quick PDF for going back and looking at events that are going on. You go back and look at history, but if you keep track of this stuff hour by hour, it's a great site, and John and them have done a really good job. I'm not John's publicity team, but the folks at SPC. Again, spcnoaa.gov /EXPER /surface maps. The only thing special in that is, remember, and that's one word, surface maps, with the M being uppercase. I think you'll have a fun time. PDF output. Thank you, John. Thank you, the people up at SPC.
Outstanding. Will that serve as your pick of the week, Troy Kimmel?
That is.
Good deal. Well, we're glad you're here, Troy. We got to have you back more often.
Hey, I look forward to it. Good to see everyone.
That's outstanding. So what's your pick of the week, Rick Smith?
Well, sadly, we continue to hear in the news of fatalities in vehicles due to the heat, and Brian's Professor Peters covered a lot of this. But there's a great website that talks about statistics from Jan Null from San Jose State University, and that link will be in the show notes. But it's interesting to note 25 children. Now, this is not counting adults. We had a tragic situation down in Troy's neck of the woods over the weekend with some people that died in a vehicle. But 25 children have died in vehicles just in 2017. So that's continues to be an issue. So this website has a breakdown of the statistics. It's really sobering to look at that and think about it. And it continues to be a serious issue. So hopefully we can continue to work on that and make those numbers go down and go away.
Well, we were in Arizona last week at the Grand Canyon, and I was surprised to learn of an event that occurred in the National Forest near Payson on Saturday the 15th, in which some folks were having a reunion or a birthday party, I believe, at a popular swimming hole there in the National Forest. And unbeknownst to them, 30 miles upstream, a major flash flood was developing, and the National Weather Service and Flagstaff issued a flash flood warning a full hour and a half before the 30-foot wall of water got to the water hole. And with no warning, these folks were swept away. And I think there were 9 or 10 fatalities. And the only thing that would have saved those people that day, based on current technology, was a NOAA weather radio, because there was no cell service, no other way to get the warnings there, no sirens, no anything like that. And a weather radio might have saved their lives, but was just shocking to me to see 10 fatalities in a flash flood that was under basically blue skies, and just points out how far we still have to go in so many different areas. But my pick of the week will be the book Totality: The Complete Guide to the Most Amazing of Celestial Sights, the Great American Eclipses of 2017 and 2024 by Mark Lippman and Fred Espenak. I'm getting more and more excited about this. Tony Rice is going to join us in the week before the 21st on the 14th to talk a little more about it, because we want to view it safely if we're in or near the path of totality for sure. But next week we'll be talking about Oklahoma City with Damon Lane and Damian Loads. That's going to be a fun show. We'll have Dr. Judith Curry on August 7th, and we'll come back with Leah Daly on August 14th, and Craig Fugate, the former director of FEMA, on August 21st. And Dennis, you once thought that the development of the Department of Homeland Security was sort of a negative. Talk about how your opinion of that agency changed over time.
Well, yeah, I didn't like how the feds smashed FEMA to smithereens when they invented DHS. They removed 75% of FEMA's staff and budget and sent it over to DHS, and that hurt my feelings because a lot of good friends work there, and I thought we're doing good things. However, over the years, my point of view has changed, and it's fundamentally changed because DHS, at least as I've encountered it, doesn't come across like a political organization, and I know it is. It comes across like they value science, and that makes me happy. Because I think things in the arena of hazards management, terrorism management, etc., should be based on science. And one of the first things they did was establish scientific centers across the country on different topics. One of the best ones is still up and running at the University of Maryland, and it studies terrorists, how terrorist cells form, so on and so forth. And most of the research I had from DHS was with that center. So I think highly of DHS because they value science. I wish more federal agencies did. I mean, I know NOAA does, but there are a lot of others that don't pay too much attention to it.
Now, Dennis, I promised you this was going to be worth all the trouble of getting connected. Would you agree with that statement or not?
Well, I would say I agree. However, my ear still hurts from
it. Well, I really, really appreciate your perseverance. How can folks get in touch with you, Dennis, if they want to learn more about what you're doing or talk to you?
I never hide my email address or my telephone number. All they have to do is search for me on Google, and 42 pages come up, and my telephone number is right there. My email is Dennis with two N's dot Mileti, Mileti, at colorado.edu. I have University of Colorado email, even though I live in California.
Well, we are honored to have had you tonight and appreciate the effort. And I told you we were going to go to 10 o'clock. You told me we wouldn't, but we did.
Oh, it's only 8 where I am.
Okay, so we got to go another 2 hours. All right, well, we can do that. Brian Peters, can we go another 2 hours?
Oh, probably not.
So, Brian, you got a pick of the week for us?
Certainly, under the same vein as Rick's pick. Unfortunately, over the weekend, we had a lightning fatality on the Alabama side of Lake Harding, which is actually the river that separates Alabama and Georgia. And so I'm going to pick the National Weather Service's lightning safety website as my pick of the week.
It truly was a horrifying lightning death. Apparently, the gentleman was struck directly. And
apparently,
the reports are pretty gruesome. So, lightning is. We had a child today here in Birmingham.
Yes,
the Liberty Park area that was injured by lightning, an indirect strike. But you have to take this stuff seriously.
Yep.
So, anything else, Brian Peters, we need to do before we adjourn?
No, ready for bed.
Well, again, thanks to Troy for joining us. Dennis, thank you so much. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you.
Well, WeatherBrains is the weekly netcast that's about weather. 601 episodes in, almost 12 years, I think, complete now. I think we're going on our 13th year of shows. We've had a blast, and it's getting increasingly hard to find WeatherBrains we haven't talked to, but we found a good one tonight in Dennis. And Dennis, we thank you again. And next week we'll be back with the Oklahoma City show, and we hope you'll join us for that. And tell all your friends about WeatherBrains. But until next week, when we talk to Damon Lane and Damian Loads from Oklahoma City, have a great week and see you then. Troy, thank you. Dennis, thank you.
Thank you, Troy. Thank you, Dennis.
Yeah. You guys have a good night.
Hey, Dennis. Hey, Dennis. Oops, he hung up. It's all right.
All right, Brian, have a good night. Troy, yell at me.
Still illuminated back in here. This is the WeatherBrains corporate headquarters. And good evening. And the question is, why are there still 18 people watching nothing? Now it's down to 17. They heard me come back. So we are now simulcasting on Song of the Night on Periscope and the WeatherBrains post show on YouTube. This part never goes to the audio produced version. So very interesting show. I was so busy tonight with some flooding issues and things. I was had to do my real job, but I want to go back and listen to the show tomorrow. Can't wait to hear it. Very interesting topic tonight. So thanks to Dennis for coming on the show, and for Troy, our long-time friend out in Texas. And we're going to turn off the stream here. So we'll see you WeatherBrains folks next Monday night. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great week, and God bless.